Good morning, everyone. I'm going to start with my birth through the years that I grew up during segregated times, and I think that's what's going to interest you more, although the rest of it is kind of interesting too. But it's my understanding that you really would like to hear what it was like growing up during segregated times. Looking out over the audience, there aren't very many of you who grew up during those times, so you don't know what I'm talking about, and you have no idea what we had to go through. And then during those times, you would not have made any difference because that's what you were growing up in. When you grow up during segregated times, there were things that you could and could not do because of the color of your skin. And as a child, my parents made sure that I knew the rules, such as when you rode the public bus, you made sure you moved that little thing that had a sign on it that said colored patrons only. You made sure that that was in front of you wherever you were sitting on the bus. Also, when you went to certain cafeterias, there was an area where you had to sit that said colored, which made no sense to me because we come in all colors anyhow. But anyhow, and it didn't make any sense to me then. But there were also times when we rode the interstate traveling on interstate buses that we couldn't sit in certain areas on the Greyhound bus, Trailways buses, or whatever mode of transportation there was. They also had, when you go to certain stores, department stores, they wouldn't allow black women to try on the dresses that they were purchasing. So you can understand that there were a lot of don'ts for black people back in the times when I was growing up. My growing up stages, of course, was from 1941 until I became a teenager and became a pregnant mother, but we'll get to that later. Also, there were places where you would go and there were two water fountains. One said colored and one said white. You had to drink from the one that said colored. Most of the times it didn't work, so if you were thirsty, you were out of luck if you went to the fountain that didn't work that said colored. Oftentimes, they say hindsight is 20/20. It makes me wonder, did they turn it off on purpose because they really didn't want us in there to begin with. But that's how I grew up. In later years, when I became a person in the entertainment business, traveling across the country with various bands, back then we didn't have buses. We would pile everything into a station wagon, including the clothing, the instruments, and us. And we would travel across the country to various cities to perform. And we couldn't check into hotels, so any of the major hotels. So when we got to those various cities, the promoters made sure that there was someone who had a house, if we had to stay overnight, that had a house that would let us use their rooms to spend the night until we travel the next day. Those are the conditions that we traveled under back then. There were a couple occasions when I was performing and we had traveled all day going to Mississippi, playing the University of Mississippi. We were doing, in fact, we didn't know what it was going to be when we got there, but all I knew I had to sing when I got there. And this was in 1964. And we arrived about 3 o'clock that afternoon. And the young lady didn't ask me who I was. She just showed me where the colored people were going to get dressed. And so later on that day, she would come back and she says, "Is Irma Thomas coming?" I said, "Oh, she's coming. She'll be here in a little while." So we went through that scenario for about 3 or 4 times, and performance time was for 7 o'clock that evening. So about, I'd say, 6:30, she came back. And she says, "Irma Thomas hasn't gotten here yet. When is she going to show up?" I said, "You've been talking to her all afternoon." I said, "Does it make a difference?" She said, "Oh, no, I thought you were white." I said, "Well, does it make any difference now that I'm here?" I said, "I'm here and I'm not white, so do you want me to perform or not?" She said, "Oh, no, it's okay. I just thought you were white." And the reason for that, I didn't get angry with her. The reason for that, and I don't know how many of you have done your homework on music industry, but up until I want to say 67 or 68, most black musicians who had records out and had albums out did not have their pictures on the front. So consequently, we had 5 or 6 drifter groups. We had 3 or 4 different platter groups. We had several different, whoever the popular star was, if someone could sound like them and sing like them, they were out there making money off of that person's name. So I didn't get angry with her because there was no way for her to know what I looked like until I got there. And the song that was the hit during that time was called "I Wish Someone Would Care," and boy, did we. But that was the situation with me growing up. Now, the incidents that I had that I thought were rather serious prior to that one was I was playing a club in Mansoura, Louisiana. And I don't know how many of you have had that opportunity to travel from New Orleans to Mansoura on Highway 1 with all those other little connecting highways that goes through there. It's not really an easy drive. So when you get there, you're tired. And so there was a little, I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 6-room motel there that black people could use. And so that's where we would stay until time to go to the main club to perform. Well, over the years of doing that particular club, the guy finally put a room there for us. But on the first couple of occasions that I was there, about the third time we had played the club called Shep's in Mansoura, during the show that I was performing, one of the patrons decided to yell up to me, "Sing, nigga!" And I turned around and told the band, I said, "Y'all stop playing." I said, because all of us will wind up in jail because I'm not singing another note until I get an apology. So the club owner said, "What's the matter, Irma, you're not singing?" I said, "Well, one of your patrons decided to call me a nigger." And I said, "I know I don't look like a nigger because you can't tie a horse to me." And he said, "Well, I'll make sure that that person don't." I said, "No, you find him and you get him out of here now or I will not sing another note." That was the only incident that I came into that made me realize that no matter how popular you are, no matter how much money you are, they're going to always remind you that you're a black. And that's what we had to live with. We had to travel with our own tools in the car. And I learned to travel with most female items. But along with that, I had toilet paper in the car because you weren't always able to stop in the restrooms at the various service stations. You could buy their gas, but you couldn't use their bathrooms. So these are the kind of conditions that we traveled under back from the time I got into show business, which was in the late 50s, all the way up until segregation really became segregated and unsegregated, and we were able to use the facilities of all the restaurants and various hotels. Today, up now, I still have great respect for the Holiday Inn, mainly because in the very beginning of segregation, when they were fighting for civil rights and for black people to be able to check in various hotels and get a decent room, they, to my knowledge, was the very first hotel that I, as an entertainer, was able to check in and not be put in the back of the hotel because of my color. So I have great respect for the Holiday Inn because of that. But those are the incidents that I had to incur during the time of traveling on this, up and down the South, particularly in the South, because, you know, on one occasion we were even followed by the police because they thought we were there for something else, I don't know. So when they finally decided to ask us what we were doing, we told them where we were on our way to, and they said, "Oh, go ahead on." So these are the things that I had to endure. But, you know, when you look at it, hindsight's 2020, they were doing their job, but we were trying to do our job, but we got penalized for just because of the color of our skin. And it's funny because you would think after all of that I would have a hatred for white people, but I don't. Because the neighborhood that I grew up on at 1718 Felicity Street was a mixed neighborhood. And it was mixed. When I say mixed, it was a mixed neighborhood. Can you hear me? My mic just decided to go off. Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Okay, I have something. It was a mixed neighborhood because the kids, the grocery store owner who was on the corner had about 4 or 5 kids, and there was another grocery store around the corner from where we lived, had 4 or 5 kids, and we all played hopscotch, jump rope, made dolls out of rope and Coca-Cola bottles and stuff like that. So we really didn't know or it didn't make any difference to us whether you were black or white. We were out there, we were children playing together. So as we grew up, we didn't have any animosity because we knew we were living under rules that we had to live under until we got to be grown. So those were my experiences in the early stages of the civil rights movement. I wasn't a joiner of the civil rights movement because early in my career, before I had a career, early in my childhood, growing up, I was a teenage mother. So being a teenage mom, you don't put yourself in a position to where you can't take care of your children. So I wasn't one of those who sit in at the counters or who got on the buses when they weren't supposed to. I didn't do anything to break the law because I was, first of all, scared to go to jail. And I knew I had children to take care of, so I wouldn't put myself in that position because my mom only had me. And I often wonder why I didn't have any brothers and sisters. And she looked at me and said, "You're lucky you're here." So it took me a few years to figure that one out. Well, as I got older, I inquired. My mother was the oldest of 18, so I could understand why she didn't want any more. Fortunately, I had my mom around until she was 94 years old. In 2011, she passed. But yes, she taught me well, and my dad taught me well. I lost my dad in 1989. But they taught me how to live in segregated times. And yeah, they were a bit on the hard time. But if you're growing up in a situation that you know the rules and you live by the rules, as a child, you don't know the difference. And even as a young adult, it doesn't make any difference whether you like it or you don't like it. That's the situation you had to live in and live under. So you live with the situation, and that's how I survived it. Now, to move into the good stuff, as I said, I became a young mom at the age of 15. I got pregnant the summer between my 8th grade year and my 9th grade year, and my dad decided that I was going to get married. So yes, I had a shotgun wedding. My oldest child, when she was born, I turned 15 in February. She was born in May. So this coming May 1st, I will have a 64-year-old daughter. So it's kind of hard for me to say that I'm 50, huh? But then I had another kid, which was my son. He's now 60, gonna be 63. And I have to make you laugh. There's a little story behind his birth. My girlfriend and I lived back of each other, door to door in the little, well, let's say apartment flat. And we used to exchange and share maternity clothes. So if she had her baby first and I hadn't had mine yet, she would give me her maternity clothes and vice versa. Well, on this occasion, when my son was born, she was due before me. And I got up I think it was on a Thursday morning, and I was washing all of his clothes because my dad wouldn't let me use the washing machine, so I was doing it on the washboard. And I didn't realize how far in labor I was. I kept having these pains and I wouldn't stop. And my uncle was home with me, poor thing. I put him through some misery. I washed all the clothes, I hung them out on the line, and finally he convinced me that I needed to go to the hospital. So I said, okay, get the landlord to come bring me. So he brought me. And I think I caused the poor landlord to never take his own wife to the hospital because my son was born on the broad overpass in the curve on the way to the hospital. So I don't think he brought his wife to the hospital after that. But he was born there, and when I got back home the next day, took me into the hospital, checked me for temperature, and did the umbilical thing, and cleaned us both up and everything, and sent us back home. So I took the clothes off the line that I'd hung out that morning. I took the clothes off the line that next day, and I called my girlfriend, and I said, come on, Kitty. Her name was Josie, but we called her Kitty. I said, come on in, Kitty, and see my new baby. She said, what baby? I said, well, I had mine yesterday. She said, no, you didn't. I said, yes, I did. So I showed him. He weighed 6 pounds and 3 ounces. I said, there he is. She said, you weren't supposed to do that. I was going to have mine before you. Well, I said, I'm sorry, it didn't work that way. She didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. But that's the way we lived, and we had neighbors who took care of each other, and we shared things with each other. We didn't have a lot of money, but we didn't realize we were poor, and it didn't matter. And then after my son was born, then I had my third child, she's now 61. And then my dad said, okay, you're having all these babies, you're gonna have to get a job, because the husband that he made me marry was not taking care of us. So I was back with my parents with 3 children. So I did go out and look for a job. My first job was at Copper Kitchens on Tulane and Carrollton, which is no longer there. I think it's a service station or something there, but that was like a little restaurant you go in. What would be something similar to that now? White Castle, something like that. But it was one of those places you can go in and get a quick breakfast and whatever. And I was a dishwasher there from 11 to 7 because my parents worked during the day and I could only work at night. And between 11 to 7 washing dishes, I would sing to keep myself company. Well, one night I was singing and the boss was there, and he came in the back. He says, what's that you singing? I said, well, I'm singing some of the popular songs on the radio. Wait, cut that noise out. I don't want to hear it. So I said, okay. Well, a few nights later, when he wasn't there, I decided to keep myself company again. Well, he decided to show up unexpectedly, and he fired me for singing on the job. So I was out of work for a few weeks or so, and finally another job came up at the Pimlico Club on South Broad and Eve, and Tommy Ridgely's band was the live band there, and the man hired me as a waitress. I was making 50 cents an hour plus tips. And every opportunity that I could get, I would get on the stage and sing with Tommy Ridgely's band. And my boss there didn't particularly care for me getting up there singing with Tommy Ridgely's band, so he would say, Irma, I didn't hire you to sing, I hired you to wait tables. I said, okay. He says, are you? I said, no, I'll think about that. He says, okay, well, we're gonna think about it. So true enough, about a week or so later, I decided there was a song I called There Goes My Baby, and it was a hit at the time. And so I said, Tommy, I feel like singing. So I got up on the stage and I was singing, There Goes My Baby. And my boss walked in and said, you're fired. So I said, well, Tommy, I don't have a job anymore. I guess I won't be seeing you. But he said, don't worry about it, Irma. You're going to sing with us. So I started singing with Tommy Ridgely. And he said, I'm going to get you a record contract. Well, I didn't believe him because, you know, that was the thing back then. They get you a record contract and nothing would happen about it. But he told me where to go and I didn't show up. So he came and he got me. He came and got me on a Monday. I auditioned on a Monday. There was a lady there named Dorothy Labastri. She had a song called You Could Have My Husband, but Please Don't Mess With My Man. I recorded on a Tuesday. No, I recorded on a Wednesday, and that next week I had a record out, and the rest is history. So you never know when you're looking back, hindsight, they say it's 2020, and I look back over my life and I said, you know, I got fired for singing on the job twice. So somebody was trying to tell me something. I'm sure it's glad I didn't listen. I went on and kept singing, and the times weren't really, you know, great, but I was making a little bit more money singing than I was doing as a waitress. And the first professional job that I got with Tommy Ridgely, we drove all the way to Waveland, Mississippi. And I don't know if you're familiar with the area, but Waveland is about 45 miles to the east of New Orleans on Highway 10, or depending on which one you take. And it rained all day that day, and I didn't realize he had worked for the door. And he didn't make very much money, but he gave me what I was going to make, and the rest of us who was on the show, he paid us. And we all pitched in to buy gas to get back to New Orleans. So that was the beginning of my career, but I was not discouraged at all because I was having so much fun. And even today, I'm still having a lot of fun. But my career hasn't always been profitable to me because when Camille came along, I don't know if you know about Camille, she's a hurricane that happened back in the late 60s. And I had a lot of work booked along the Mississippi coastlines, and they tore up all my work. So I hung around the city for as long as I could trying to get a job, not a singing job, but a job, and nobody would hire me. So I made a big decision to move to California. And I did. I put 2 of my kids on a plane, and my Aunt Rose in Los Angeles met them and got them. And I stayed put for another couple of weeks to get together to pack up everything I was going to, and I moved to Los Angeles in the year 1970. In fact, January 1970, I moved to Los Angeles. And I needed a job, so I went to some of the clubs trying to get singing work because I had been singing a few years. I had an established name, so I thought it would be easy to get work in Los Angeles. Little did I know it was another story out there. They wanted you to pay them to work in their clubs, which I thought was horrible. So I didn't let that stop me. It just so happened that there was a new store opening up in Los Angeles on La Cienega Boulevard called Montgomery Ward's. It wasn't really a new store, but it was new to me. So I went to Montgomery Ward's and I applied for a job. And I applied under my real name. I didn't change my name or anything, and I got a job as a sales clerk. And I was working in lingerie. And I worked in lingerie for about 6 months. And then a job came up in the sewing machines and vacuum cleaners department. And it was a commission job. So I said, well, I could make a little bit more money if I worked over there. So I moved over to sewing machines and vacuum cleaners. So to demonstrate the sewing machines, I would cut out clothing for my girls at home. and I would sew them on the job to demonstrate the sewing machines. So my boss would come by and he would say, well, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm demonstrating the sewing machine. And I would show him the finished product. He said, not bad, not bad. Well, I sold a lot of sewing machines. Then in 1972, there came a law that any department in a major network department store, any department that was male dominated and a female wanted to work in it, they had to allow her to work. Well, an opening came up in automotives. And guess who volunteered? Well, it wasn't that I didn't know anything, because like I said, we traveled on the highways back in the early parts of my career, and we weren't able to pull in and get something fixed every time you wanted to. So when they would raise the hood up, I would be out there being nosy. So I learned all the parts to the engine and everything, so I knew what I was doing. So I applied for the job, and the first week I was there, I sold 5 engines. None of them came back, because before I started selling them, I went and I talked to the service manager, and I said, look, I know about engines and I know all the parts and what have you. I said, but what would be a good deal for someone when they're buying an engine so it won't come back to the store? Because Montgomery Wards would take it back if it didn't work, because that was their policy. He said, Irma, whenever you sell an engine, make sure you tell them that they need to get new spark plug wires, they need to get their radiators cleaned out, they need to get the carburetors cleaned out, and all this good stuff. He said, make sure they get new spark plug wires. I said, well, I'm going to sell them whatever it is you tell me to sell them, and that's what I did. So because of that, I never had any engines to be returned, because they did have a new working engine in their cars when they left there. And there was an occasion when I was working in that department, to show you how you men think. There was an occasion when a gentleman came in and he wanted something, and I asked him, I said, sir, may I be of help to you? He says, no, I don't want no woman waiting on me. I said, fine. Well, at that time when that happened, I had gotten a promotion to being a department assistant, so I knew what I was doing. So he went to the little guy that was in the same department with me working. He says, so the little guy said, Irma. I said, no, he doesn't want a woman waiting on him, so you're going to have to find and figure that out yourself. So he asked the young man, well, who is she? He said, well, she know more than I do about what you want to buy. You need to talk to her. So that's where I learned a lot of my survival skills, being on the road during those segregated times, learning how to work on automobiles, because you didn't have a choice back then. They really didn't want to do anything to help us as a black people, but little did they know they taught us well. Survival is a thing that I know how to do very well. Today or tomorrow, I get to the point where I can't make a living singing. I know how to sew. I do a mean pot of red beans and rice. I do a very mean cheese, because y'all ate some of my cheese. They call it cheese custard. Macaroni and cheese. In fact, my recipes in some of these books around here. But I could survive because I have survival skills. Because of segregated times, I was taught well on how to survive. And even though I may not have had any really harsh things that I consider extremely harsh things happen to me during those times, it did teach me some survival skills that I brought to my kids. I taught my children. And this is my 3rd husband. We've been together 45 years. I have 7 kids between the 2 of us, 15 grandchildren, and 12 great-grandkids. I lost count, because that's the last time I heard from any of them. I had 12 great-grandchildren. So I am a typical everyday person, even though y'all don't look at me that way. Y'all look at me as this star, but I do everything you do. I have the same problems you have. I have to pay bills, although I don't have very many left. I paid them all off. Thank you, Lord. And yes, I grew up in the church, and yes, I'm in the choir. I'm in the alto section of my choir at Nazareth Baptist Church on Hamilton and Pritchard. Anytime you want to step back there on a Sunday, you'll see me set up in the choir doing my share of singing. Yes, I have to sing solos kind of often, but back there I'm known as Sister Jackson. So that's basically my total career. My husband and I got together when he went on a show with me, and he saw that the guy that was supposed to be my manager was cheating me out of my money, so he told me about it. But when we met, he had no idea who I was. I was visiting some friends at a club on South Claiborne Avenue called the Las Vegas Strip, and I passed him, and he said, "Say, lady, you got a ravel on your pants." I said, "Okay." And I went on and I visited with my friends, and I came back and I said, "You can take the ravel off." and that we've been together ever since. So that's basically who Irma Thomas is in a synopsis of my life. And if you have any questions and something I may have left out that you want to know about in more detail, feel free to ask and I'll answer it. If I don't, I'll let you know.
The guy who fired you as a dishwasher, did he ever live to see or admit that you had a singing career?
Oh,
and
yes.
also tell about how the people in Europe just love New Orleans singers and bring you over there all the time.
Well, the guy who fired me the first time happens to be, I don't know if he's still alive or not, but his name was Shahardy, last name was Shahardy. And I was playing a show at the River Queen at the top of the Marriott Hotel before they built the second segment of the Marriott Hotel. And he had the audacity to send me a note and wanted me to sing It's Raining. I said, oh, are you that Shahardy that used to have the copper kitchens on Tulane Avenue? He said, yeah. I said, you the one who fired me. So I had the pleasure of giving him that bit of that bit of information. But everywhere we travel, I've traveled in a few different countries, and they love New Orleans music. They know more about you, especially in Japan. They know more about you than you know about yourself. Because when I played Japan, they were telling me who all was on the recording session and what solos they, and I didn't remember that stuff. But they love, Louisiana artists are well loved in all the other countries. So we don't have a problem when we're traveling anymore. Did I answer your question, dear? Yeah. She's a girlfriend. I don't know if you heard about this group that we formed some years ago. It was a lot of people out of the TV industry, business owners, nightclub owners, restaurant owners, and some that didn't have any businesses at all. I have this saying, girlfriend, and girlfriend, such and such a thing. So a lady named Karen Butler, who's deceased now, she said, why don't we form a club? And we did. We got together and we formed a club, and Margarita Bergen is in it. God, Margarita with all that energy. She's also in it. Well, what we did and still do when we can, we get together and we decide which charity that we're going to help. And up until a few years ago, every year on my birthday, rather than having a birthday party for myself, I would dedicate my birthday to whatever charity we were trying to raise funds for. When I turned 50, the Hyatt Regency gave us the ballroom, and various people donated various things. And I don't know if you're familiar with the old grocery store called Swagman's. Well, my picture was put on the Swagman's bag, and I knew I had made it then. We had so many people in that place to celebrate my 50th birthday that the fire marshals wouldn't let anybody else come in. We had, the thing to get in, you had to come up with 5 grocery items, non-perishable grocery items, and you had to come up with $10. For my 50th birthday, we raised 4 tons of food, and I don't know how much money, because I don't remember what charity we were working for. That's a long time ago. But that's what I used to do with my birthdays up until a few years ago. I stopped doing it because they got sick of me and my birthdays. So the last one I celebrated was when I was 75, and we just had a party for the Wise Women's Center at Delgado Community Center. It's a center that was formed because it took me 15 years to get a 2-year degree. I was determined because, of course, being a teenage mom, back then they didn't let you go to school. You couldn't go like these girls go pregnant. They didn't let you do that back then. So I was determined to finish my education, and I went back to school and got my GED. And then I got to Delgado when I was in my 40s, and I graduated when I was 61 years old. In fact, the year I graduated from Delgado with my 2-year degree, I had 2 grandchildren graduating from high school. And of course, in recent years, I've been blessed with being honored with an honorary doctorate from Tulane University, which I'm very proud of. But that's part of my life. So, any more questions? Don't feel shy. I'm sure you're not shy when you're doing your job. Yes. Oh, I've worked with, fortunately, I've been blessed to have worked with B.B. King, Dolly Parton, Bonnie Raitt. When we came back after the storm, Paul Simon and I sung Bridge Over Troubled Waters, and you could hear a pin drop when we got through singing. I think everybody was kind of reminiscing about Katrina on that one. But I've had the pleasure of working with all of those. And when I was doing the theaters, we would be on what they call mega shows. Then it was given at a theater, and you would go out and you would do 2 songs. Well, I've been on the shows with the Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, The Temptation, The Time, Garnet Mims. That's just to name a few of them, because that's the way they did shows back then. I didn't really do a lot of touring with a lot of them, but I was on shows that we shared billing on. So some of them I liked and some of them I didn't. And oh, I can tell you another segment that I think would be interesting to you. Back in the day when, in the segregated times when dressing rooms were not available to us in these various places to work, and if they had a dressing room, you had to share it with the musicians and all. I was always afraid of going to jail because 2 friends of mine, who's now been pardoned, thank God, got arrested for having 2 joints on them. And I said, I'm not going to jail for somebody else's problems. You would get arrested and being put in jail for being guilty by association. I didn't smoke and didn't drink, and I sure wasn't going to jail for somebody else's problem. So what I would do, I would dress in the car. And that's how I would get dressed. I carried a mirror, and of course, like I said, I carried everything I needed in the car with me, so I could get dressed when they were in there doing what they was doing. I was out in the car getting dressed, so that's how I survived, not going to jail for some of that stuff that happened back then. But yes, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of people that are well known. My biggest prize, and I've never been nervous performing to that extent, but on my 55th birthday, I had the pleasure and the honor of sharing the recording studio with B.B. King. Now here's a man whose records I had been hearing all my life, because my dad on Saturdays would play those records, and Lightning Hopkins, B.B. King, John Lee Hooker was his stuff. And so to have that honor to share the recording studio with him, and the song was "We're Gonna Make It," and we've been making it ever since. That was my biggest pride and joy. Any more questions? Yes?
How long were you in Los Angeles working?
I worked 2 years in Los Angeles at, we called it Monkey Wards. And then I got a transfer because I really wanted to sing. I got a transfer to Oakland, which is, Northern California. And I transferred my, in the automotive department there to the automotive department in Richmond, California, which is just outside of Oakland, and I used to drive back and forth. So I continued to work for Montgomery Wards up until 1977. I used to sing on weekends and do my job at the store during the day. When you got 4 kids to feed, baby, you got to survive, And that's how I did it. But then I started coming back to New Orleans on various occasions, doing various jobs. And I played my first Jazz Fest in 1974. And I have not missed one since. I'm scheduled out there this Jazz Fest. I'm doing a gospel set in the gospel tent, and I'm doing my R&B set on the Acura stage, and we're also doing a tribute to Dr. John. So I'll be a pretty busy lazy out there. And also doing French Quarter Festival. I think I'm doing the Friday in French Quarter Festival. So I'm still working. I have to sit down on occasion, but I'm learning that when your body tells you to do something, you better listen, because you pay a big price for it. I had a recording session a few weeks ago, and I thought I could do like I used to do, go in the studio, and you go in the studio at a certain time and you do everything you try to do for that day. We were trying to finish an album in 3 days, and so I tried to do it in 1 day, and it didn't work. I am having what they call AFib, and I'm being treated for AFib. I don't know how many of you have that problem, but it's a deal with your heart not being regular and all. And while in the studio, I had an episode with AFib, so I've been kind of taking it easy. And the doctor said, well, what were you doing? I said, all I was doing was singing. He said, well, how long did you do it? I said, well, we went in at 11:30. We didn't come out until 7 o'clock that evening. Yeah. I did that for 2 days. On the second day is when my body said, oh, no, you can't do that. So now I'm paying attention. So I don't like sitting down singing, but I do put a stool there just in case. If I've done a few songs and I feel myself getting tired, I do sit down. I'm learning to pay attention. Yes?
Did you ever get an apology for being treated that way?
No. Please, come on now. You were lucky if you got out of the job, let alone getting an apology. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing you Friday at Family Garage.
Oh, Oh, you heard about that one. Yeah, I am doing Family Girl. For those of you, I understand you're a neophyte when it comes to those things.
What's that?
I am performing Friday.
I'll be there Saturday.
Oh, well, you're gonna miss me.
Oh,
Okay. That.
You can have my husband, but please don't mess
Well, believe it or not, guess whose song that's his favorite song? Eric Paulson. Every morning that I've ever shown up at WWL to sing, that's the song he wants me to sing. People gonna realize that I do have other songs, but that's what he wants to hear. Yes, I will be doing it for you, sweetheart. Will do. Yes. How many albums have I done? If I told you I don't know, I wouldn't be lying. Because there are a lot of reissued albums that I'm not aware of. The ones that I know about, and let's see, Wish Someone Would Care, take a look. In Between Tears and New Orleans, so 4. But from those 4, they may have 15 others out there that are reissued. Oh, I've also had, the CDs would be Safe With Me, CD and album, and Simply the Best, which I got my first Grammy nomination for, and then I've had 2 others, and I won the Grammy for, what was the name of that album? It's been a while. He got it right here. But I did win a Grammy, and I was 61 when I won the Grammy, and that's a moment that's kind of hard to explain to people because they figure you got to have a hit record to get a Grammy, but no. The Grammy committee listens to all the songs that have been released for that year within the time frame that they tell you to, and they judge you on your talent ability. And I won mine the same year that Katrina hit, so it was kind of hard for me to remember, you know, because I'm in my own way, I'm kind of keeping Katrina back there because it was devastating. But when they called my name to win that Grammy, I was just sitting there and said, did they really call my name? And my husband said, honey, you got to get up because you can't get it sitting here, you got to get up. So he walked me up to the stage, and till today, I don't know who the presenter was. That's how excited I was. And then you go through a battery of interviews when you're going through the back, when they always say, you see them going off the stage to the back. Well, while they're going off stage, there's about 17 different interviewing, magazines, TV cameras and all that, and you're going through that battery. When I got to one of them, one of the ladies had the audacity to ask me that they gave me that Grammy because of Katrina, and I looked at her, I counted to 10 4 or 5 times, and I swallowed 4 or 5 times, and I counted again, and I looked at my producer, which was Scott Billington. I said, should I say what I'm thinking or should I say something? And he said, Irma, be nice. So I said, well, if that was the reason that they gave it to me, then I will take it back to New Orleans with pride and say thank you. And that's the kind of stuff you deal with in this business. Any more? Yes.
I know there's a lot of crowd favorites, but what's your favorite song?
I Wish Someone Would Care. And my reasons for that being my favorite song, it was the very first song that I wrote. And I wrote it because I was pissed at my second husband. And it became number 17 in the nation. So it was a good song. And for those of you who may not be aware of it, I did Time Is On My Side before the Rolling Stones. But for years I wouldn't sing it because every time I would sing the song, they would say, oh, she's singing a Rolling Stones song. I got so tired of explaining that it was not the Rolling Stones song. So finally, I think it was in, I want to say 69 or 80, no, it was 80-something, 96, that Bonnie Raitt came to New Orleans to do a New Year's Eve show, and she asked me to come over to her set, and she said, Irma, I know you don't want to do this song, but I wish you would do it. She said, because time has been on our side. I said, when you put it that way, you're right. So that was when I started back to singing Time Is On My Side, but for years I would not sing it, because the British invasion, anything that was British and could halfway sing became a hit here in the United States. And I still say Mick Jagger can't sing, but he's laughing all the way to the bank. True. Think about it. But he's laughing all the way to the bank. Any more?
Who is your favorite artist today?
You want to know the truth? I don't listen to very many. I'm a game show network addict. When I'm not in my car, I don't listen to a lot of the music of today because there are very few songs that make sense. And I'm old school to the bone. If it doesn't make any sense, I don't sing it. And whenever something is introduced in my show that's new, one of my fans have either called me or written me an email and said, Irma, you need to listen to this song. You could do this song and put it in your show. I don't really listen to the radio because half that stuff on there I don't want to hear. I wouldn't let my kids listen to that, but they're grown. They can listen to what they want to now. But it's just awful. There's no storyline. And the few songs that have storylines you don't hear. So I don't have a favorite of today. Yes?
Have you written any other songs for any other artists, or have any artists ever asked you to write a song for?
I've been covered by a lot of artists, but none of them have really asked me to write anything for them. But I have been blessed with one of my songs that I recorded back in 1964 on the album Wish Someone Would Care album. Was the, I don't know if they want to call it the introductory song, but it got played every week on Black Mirrors, called Anyone Who Knows What Love Is Will Understand. And I had someone call me and told me about it, and I got a nice fancy check from that one. But no, I've been covered, but not by, no one ever asked me to actually write a song for them. And the songs that I have written, one of them is called Hold Me While I Cry, and I call it the menopause song. Because when I would do shows, my audiences were basically, even now, most of my people in the audience are in their 50s and early 60s. And the guys that's sitting out there, I kind of explained to them that when we are having our own private spring, winter, summers, and fall, how to act with us, because we do get a little crazy sometimes. So I call it the menopause song. It's called Hold Me While I Cry. And and yeah, that's what we want you guys to do. You know, we don't want anything, you know. We don't have that 7-year itch like you guys do. You guys get the 7-year itch and you don't know what part you want to scratch. And I literally tell that story on stage, trust me. I am blessed in that I don't feel shy with my audience. I don't sing at my audience, I sing to them. And I'm one of the few artists who will allow my audience to make requests. And I think the young lady had a hand up back here. I wasn't ignoring you, I was just trying to finish my thought. Yes?
Do any of your children or grandchildren sing?
I don't know about the grandchildren, but my son waited till he got in his 60s to decide he wanted to be a star, get into the music business. But he has talent. He just waited too late to start trying to investigate it. But I told him to go ahead on and try, because nowadays it seems like the older entertainers are coming back. I think her name was Tammy something, won a Grammy for an album that she recently did. So I said, it's not over yet. I said, your hair might be gray, but you still have talent. Go ahead on and go for it. So yeah, he can play several instruments. I have a piano, been sitting in my house since Katrina, and I couldn't play you a whole song if I tried. But I can run the scale. But yes, he's talented. Now the grandchildren, I have a granddaughter who makes cakes, and she's been on a couple of those cake making shows. She did one last Christmas, I think it was, when they did the elf thing, and she had everything together, and just before they started the judging, the back of his head fell off, so she had to do it. But she's been on another one since then, so she makes beautiful cakes. But for those two shows, she didn't do too well, but she has that talent. She went into the Air Force for 8 years and had a baby, and decided that when she got out, she went into artistry and was doing pictures, but nobody was buying her art. She was wasting money, so she said she baked a cake for a friend, and a friend liked it, so she started baking cakes for a living, and she does all these beautiful decorations. And if you want a cake made like somebody, she does all of that. I don't know how she get it from, and she doesn't eat cake. Go figure. But yeah, that's her talent. Yes.
You started singing in the church as a young girl.
Oh, baby, back in the day, if you went to church whether you wanted to or not, and thank God for that. You know, I grew up in the church. I've always been a performer per se, and when you were in the Baptist churches in the South, any church in the South, as a young black kid, you participated. You were given little cards in Sunday school that I learned to read, believe it or not, before I even got in school because of those little cards. You were given little pieces to say, and if you had half of a voice, you were given something to sing. You had your turn every Sunday, so mine used to come up kind of regular, and I used to be ready to do it. And I figured out why. Being an only child, that was the one time I could get all the attention. And I've been doing it ever since, still singing in the choir, yeah. But yeah, I was brought up in the church, and I've always sung in either the junior choir, the children's choir, junior choir, and the adult choir. Always will. Love it, yes. Anybody else? Well, if there's no more questions, you can have your mic back.